class. Schedule. Did you really tell us? Here's dates. I'm going to do these things by these dates. And it seems plausible. Not, I'm going to do this, and here's where the miracle has to happen, and then I'm going to do. Okay. Yeah. Appropriate timing, so I've forgotten who it was. One of you had their milestones really relaxed at the beginning, and at the end it was that exponential burst of effort. It may be that's the way it actually works, but your schedule doesn't want to present it that way. Goals, very ambitious, acceptable, and insufficient. Okay. I don't think anybody here, at least certainly so far, is was your presentation well organized in terms of the order of topics you presented? Whether you used diagrams effectively? Is your workflow that you've laid out reasonable? And summary: great presentation, good presentation, acceptable presentation, and you might get no marks at all. Okay, which means you didn't get to acceptable. So I think everybody here will. Certainly, everybody will. With that, let me turn it over to Christina Tobias.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Tobias. I'm still an undergrad, but I'm graduating this semester, and I'll finish my grad, hopefully with some of you guys next spring. So I'm the only person in my project, so I'm my whole team, and I'm going to talk to you today about my cost-efficient home air quality system. So the idea behind this home air quality system is that a lot of people in their homes have all these indoor air problems. So between dust, between gases like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, at a certain level, carbon dioxide is not healthy for people and could be potentially very harmful. There's mold, there's viruses, all of this is in the air, and many of it, or most of it actually can be measured. So my idea is to create a system that has a sensor, and essentially the end product will be a website that people can look at what their values are of certain metrics of their air in their home. So a little bit of background on statistics in the United States. So 6.1 million children and 20 million adults experience allergic rhinitis, which is inflammation of the nose and is caused by the air around you. So this can be caused by pollen, by mold, by dust, and by different animal dander. That's just in the air, in your homes, even outside. A lot of these come from outside. And humidity in the air can actually cause this mold and dust mites. I'm allergic to dust mites, so it's something that affects me a lot, and so this would be something that I'd want in my home to measure if there's a lot of dust or something else that could affect me and my family. Also, asthma affects 1 in 12 Americans, and my device will hopefully be able to help all these people by giving them metrics on what is in their air and informing them so that they can make decisions about if they need to bring in a filter or bring in somebody who specializes in cleaning their air and making sure it's safe for them. So these are some of the indoor air quality measurements that I can measure using different sensors. So there's carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, which include like formaldehyde, different super reactive chemical compounds that make people very, very sick, and then also humidity and dust. So dust is really unique. That's the next slide. So the safety levels of a lot of these are actually really small. So it's in parts per million or parts per billion. So carbon dioxide, the safe levels are between 250 to 1,000 parts per million, and it's dangerous for health for humans over 5,000 parts per million. Carbon monoxide, it's 0 to 9 parts per million that are safe, and anything over 25 is dangerous. So that's something to really keep in mind, because an increasing amount of people pass away from carbon monoxide poisoning because of gases in their homes that start leaking and you don't even notice because it's odorless. Then also VOC levels are in parts per billion, so it's very, very small amounts of this can be harmful. Dust, any dust is actually dangerous, as we can see in this next slide. All of these things are dust. So anything from pollen all the way to gaseous contaminants. Once you get on this like smaller end of the spectrum, your lungs actually can absorb the different particles, and therefore it can be really dangerous depending on if you have asthma, if you have other lung problems, if you've had pneumonia in the past, things like that. So it's really interesting, especially for those that have kids and are trying to keep their house safe. So this is not what I'm going to implement, but this is the overall idea if I was going to put this into production. So I'd have 4 different sensors, and these sensors would measure the VOC and carbon dioxide readings, temperature and humidity, dust, and carbon monoxide. Sorry.
The fact that you have VOX and CO2 together, does that mean the sensors react to both of them?
Yeah, so it's...
You can't really separate them.
Yeah, so the reason it's together is that the CO2 is an equivalent CO2 level, and there's something about the VOC and the CO2, I don't really understand chemistry that well, that the sensor can pick up both. I'm actually going to be using that you'll hear about later on. The idea is to take these 4 sensors, connect them to a Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi then will communicate to a web server, which will then be shown on a web application. This is just a simple layout so you can understand the whole idea. Because then the cost for this, so the reason I say it's low cost is because for what I just showed you with the 4 sensors, the Raspberry Pi, that's going to be $94 I've paid. So I bought 2 of the sensors just in case one of them doesn't work for some reason, because hardware always tends to blow up at some point. And then I bought the Raspberry Pi. So if I put this in production, it would actually be a lot less because, one, I probably wouldn't use a Raspberry Pi. The reason I'm using a Raspberry Pi is because it has a Wi-Fi chip on it already, and I've done a little bit of development on it, so it's not like I'm learning a whole new microcontroller. And then also, if you buy these things in bulk, I probably could get this number down to $50. And most other units that are out in the market are around 150 to 200, depending on how good they are, but none of them measure all of these things. So my project would be to take the CCS 811 sensor, which is the VOC and equivalent carbon dioxide sensor, and connect it to the Raspberry Pi, create a web server, which I'll explain later using Node.js, and put it up in a web application so that people can see what their air quality has been and what it is now. So it'll have a database that holds all this information, and it'll look something like, so this is just a mock-up of what it could look like. Each person will have their own account, so each household will have their own account. So this is Jane Doe's account. They'll have settings. They can look up dates of what their settings are for the VOC and the equivalent carbon dioxide readings. And then one of the most important things would be to have an alert that shows if any of these levels are above the safe level. In production, it would be great to have some kind of app on your phone that would send you push notifications, like danger, get out of your house, or something of the sort, like call whatever number you need to call, depending on which gas or whatever the problem is. But on my app, I'll just find the levels that are too high and post it on here, because also I have looked into sending notifications and sending text like off of websites, and at a certain point it's charging money. I've already spent over $100 on it. I don't want to spend too much more. the components I'm going to use, again, are the CCS 811 sensor, which is called the air quality sensor. And again, it measures the TVOC, which is just the VOC levels, and the carbon dioxide. I'll use a Raspberry Pi. And then for the web server, I've decided that I'm going to run it on the Raspberry Pi. In production, I'd run it on a bigger server, one that can handle a lot of requests, things like that. But the reason I want to do it on the Raspberry Pi is because I've done research into it, and the Raspberry Pi has 4 cores, the new Raspberry Pi 3 does. It will be able to handle running a web server and talking. So I'm going to use Node.js for the web server and use Express, which is a framework of Node.js for the website and to communicate. And then the database I decided to use is the PostgreSQL database. Just because I found some research on it, I thought it looked interesting. It was kind of an arbitrary decision.
I think Mongo would be a better match. So many people use Mongo with Node that you got a lot of work already done for you. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, actually,
I don't have any issue about it, but
I've looked into Node, and Node has, like, Node.js has the ability, just like Mongo has like some APIs and stuff. It has that for PostgreSQL too. So I'll look more into it, but that's just kind of arbitrarily what I've chosen.
Curiosity.
And then the web application will be using HTML, CSS, Express, so maybe some JavaScript. The flow of this.
So your intent is to do so the server has to do a little bit of processing, right? To create the displays, and so your model is you'll do that processing in JavaScript.
Yeah.
Server side. Okay, cool.
I also this project I've done more with sensors and microcontrollers in the past than I've done with web development. So the web development for me is more of what I'm learning. Every sensor is different though, and every way you have to handle it. I've never sent anything up from the Raspberry Pi to a web server or things like that. So the in-betweens are the parts that are probably going to challenge me the most. So how everything is going to talk is we're going to start with the sensor, and it's going to use I2C to talk to the Raspberry Pi, which I'll explain what that is later. How many of you guys have developed on a microcontroller? No one? Okay. Well, then I'll explain that a little bit more later. From the Raspberry Pi to the Node.js web server, it's just going to be an HTTP post request, and that HTTP protocol will talk between the web server and the web application.
The 12C, is that a serial link?
I2C?
Oh, I2C?
Yeah.
Serial.
Yes, it's serial. Yes. So my tasks are laid out here. The beginning tasks are just setting up things, like setting up the Raspberry Pi. I haven't done that yet. You have to basically download the operating system onto it goes into it. Yes, sorry, a micro SD card, and things like that to make sure it's all up and running. I have to solder the sensor because it doesn't have pins on it yet. And then after that, I'm going to get communication working between the Raspberry Pi and sensor. That's probably my first goal because that's definitely what I'm going to be showing in the next presentation, is how it works, and hopefully be able to bring in a multimeter to show you guys that these are what's coming in and out so you understand it more at a physical level, which is why I really like hardware, is because you can see everything physically. And then I'll set up the web server and create the simple website. And then finally connect the Raspberry Pi to the web server, add the database. And so it's pretty and it works well and users would actually want it. So again, the hardware I'll be using is the Raspberry Pi 3. So the Raspberry Pi 3, or all Raspberry Pis, run the Raspbian operating system. And it's a Linux-based operating system. Debian is a version. And it has an onboard Wi-Fi chip, which is why it's so useful for this project. A lot of the older Raspberry Pis don't have onboard Wi-Fi chips. It has 4 cores, 1.2 gigahertz CPU clock, and 1 gigabyte RAM. So it essentially has everything you need to to do anything at this level. And it's a really good resource, and it's only $35. This chip that I'll be using, again, uses I2C protocol, and that's how you talk back and forth from the microcontroller. It's really just that simple. You look at the data sheet, you read through it a couple of times, and you figure out how to get the data off of it, and that's really all that you need. And also, the Raspberry Pi will be able to power the chip. On the software side, I'll make the web server and the web application, again, using Express and Node.js. Jade is a template engine underneath Express, and it essentially allows you to put values into the HTML, any variables that you have. Again, I'll use HTML and CSS, and then the database I can decide at a later. On the Raspberry Pi, you program in C++, and I'll use C++ to communicate with the sensor using I2C, and then the socket class to do the HTTP process that's already on the Raspberry Pi to help me not have to write everything from scratch. So I'm going to talk about I2C for a couple minutes. So essentially, I2C is really cool because it only requires 2 wires. There's one master and multiple slaves. So say this master is trying to talk to these slaves. This master has to wait until master 1 is done to be able to talk. On these wires, you can communicate 2 ways. So if you have data coming from the master to the slave, then the master will stop talking and talk back to the slave can talk back to the master. You send 9 bits of data at once, 8 bits of the actual data, and then 1 acknowledged or not acknowledged bit. And that bit is really actually cool because all of this will be, so say you're trying to write to the slave. So the master sends these 8 bits to the slave, and then this last bit is from the slave back to the master. So it's essentially acknowledging that they received the information and that they can use it.
And if you don't get that acknowledgement, you resend?
Yeah, you'll have some kind of protocol to say what it is. So like I'd be able to say if resend or if they didn't get it, like it's not important. The SCL line is the clock signal line, and then the SDA is the data line. It uses pull-up resistors. So I find this really interesting. If you've ever used microcontrollers, you know that a lot of different ones use different input and output voltage levels. So say you're using one that's 5 volt and one that's 3.3 volt, you can use I2C between them and not have any issues. So it has to be at least over half of the other voltage because the pull high needs to be high. So you can't use like a 2.5 volt with a 5 volt, but it also allows, it prevents damage to drivers and things like that because the device can only pull it low. It can never pull it up to that. And that's awesome because in the past I've used a Teensy and a Raspberry Pi, and I don't remember exactly which one was which, but it could work and we didn't have to have additional. If that is an issue, you can just buy another chip and it will do it for you. It saves you a little bit more money. And then down here, so you always have to start with a start condition. So the SDA line must go low before the SCL line. If this looks foreign to you, it's essentially, if you look at a multimeter, you'll be able to see all of this. And if none of you guys have seen it before, I'll try to bring it in for the pros presentation, just because this is how a lot of things work in computers, and it's really cool. That's why I'm so interested in things at the firmware level and below, because it's very physical, and if something's wrong, it's not like you can debug it by putting in some extra code to see what it is, which you can do, but you can just look at it physically if it has a high voltage or a low voltage.
You can use a oscilloscope.
Yeah, oscilloscope. Yeah, you can use oscilloscope. The multimeter just cleans it
There are already software implementations of oscilloscope actually in the website, so we can directly stream it to that, and you can check it in the software oscilloscopes.
Oh yeah. There's things like that. We actually have this little device in the lab downstairs that's basically an oscilloscope, multimeter, like everything, and it puts it on the computer, so it's essentially
Swiss Army knife for.
Yeah. It's really cool. They got it like halfway through my junior year, and so we got to use it, and it made everything so much easier than trying to use the really old machines. So this is I2C in action with the CCS 811 sensor. If you look here, so this is the register read. So the master, so basically the Raspberry Pi is asking the sensor for data. So unfortunately, you can't see the colors very well, but this is the Raspberry Pi will send the slave address and the data register to select the register value that it's asking from the sensor. Then it'll say what data, or then it'll send the slave address, and this data will come back. So that's a lighter color, which is from slave to master. So it essentially, the slave knows exactly what the master is always asking just by whatever bits it sends over. If it's hex, 2D, it'll know that it's asking for a specific. And then all of these acknowledge bits are from the opposite from what sent the previous. So this is the way you communicate. This is the whole entire thing. This is basically all you need to know about the sensor. The sensors are very easy. Once you know one sensor, you can figure out the rest. Decently easy, but there's always going to be some kind of. Going back, finally my schedule is essentially to give myself spring break, which I won't be here for, so that's why I have 12 days to get the Raspberry Pi set up, to get the sensor communicating after I solder it. And so basically once we get back from break, I'll have all that done just a couple days after. And then to create the basic web server with database, it should be pretty quick. I'll give myself 2 weeks to create the basic website just because that'll be trickier to make it look at least good enough to be able to show something. And then give myself a little time to communicate from the Raspberry Pi to the website. And then I give myself 2 weeks at the end to complete everything, make it all pretty, just in case if one of these dates doesn't work out perfectly. I've thought it through though, and this kind of works around my rowing schedule too, since I've gone a lot of weekends. Hopefully I can do that easily. So now that you know what my project is, does anyone have any questions about hardware, about the home air quality system?
Is the other Raspberry Pis have Wi-Fi? Going to do a peer-to-peer?
Between different
and web server. So every possible
web. Yeah. Well, I think it'll be more client. I think it'll be more client server model.
So one Raspberry Pi.
So yeah, so just one Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi will just be a client of the web server, and then the website will be another.
Peer-to-peer would be where?
Yeah, would it? Yeah. I can look into it. I don't know too much about it.
You have to connect your Raspberry Pi to the router to get it up and running 24/7.
Yeah, it's just like how on your computer you connect to Wi-Fi. It's the same thing. It's just you type in the password. You don't have to have any physical connection.
It's Ubuntu running on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that, but I mean, do you have to connect it all the time to the router?
It should, once you connect it once, it should be set. And then I can make this run automatically, the whole air quality system run automatically on boot, and then it'll connect.
I mean, what if the Raspberry Pi is down? What would happen?
And the web server would be down. In production, that would never be a thing, but because this is just to show. But I could also, if I wanted to, I could put the web server just on my computer because the technology I can use on the Raspberry Pi and on my computer.
Yeah, because I have It's something like this, but I use
Okay.
Beagle Black.
Yeah.
So like I'm just curious like how we can get it up and running 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if the internet goes out or the power is out, then obviously
Because some people have like redundancy, like put like 2 Raspberry Pi, and then like distribute the data.
Hot swapping is, it's easy to say, but maybe not quite so easy to get to work right.
Yeah.
another question.
You consider the situation that you have several, Raspberry Pi sitting in your home. How do you handle, one user account? How do you handle the?
Yeah, so if there are multiple, you would name them. So like when you're setting it up, I would have some kind of script that allows people to say like this is this room, and then in that database when you're looking it up, it would say like family room, kitchen, whatever. This would actually probably work the best, probably downstairs, like near where the doors are. Like not exactly where, but like where kind of more in the kitchen area or near doors, because most of changes in the gas or like pollen and stuff would come from either inside or from like you leaving the gas range on, or if there was a leak. So if you
It's
knew
cheap
where that
enough
was.
so you can put it in several places.
Yeah.
Just put it in the bedroom, put it in the kitchen.
Yeah. Then you could easily see the trends. So eventually it would be cool to have, graphs that show ups and downs.
Necessary that we have to connect the sensor to Arduino and then connect to Raspberry Pi.
No, I can connect it just to the Raspberry. Because it's I2C and Raspberry Pi has I2C. Even if it didn't, you could program it. It's nitty gritty, but I've done it before.
So it's more like a real-time system. Like the Raspberry Pi get the real-time data and then upload to server store, and it through the website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So, but I mean, if your server has the database and that data storage is for I/O. Because upload the data is a real-time data. It means like 1 hour you will have like a bunch of data, and then you have to store it in the website. It means I/O. But okay, but it's just I'm just curious about the design. So
Are you asking like how often would people be able to see, like how fast would they be able to see the
yes.
changes? So the goal would be that every time the sensor receives input, that it's sent directly up. But at the same time, I don't know how often I would have the sensors running. So probably not every second of every day, just because that's a lot of data.
People probably once every half hour
Yeah.
would be just fine.
It would not have to be very much. Once half hour, every 15 minutes. The user could probably just choose, so depending on how much data they wanted.
If you wanted a real-time system, and there are some, systems that are built very like this that are real-time systems, they're doing, driving some actuators or something like that, then, you couldn't use a website, obviously. A website makes it non-real-time by definition, okay? But,
Actually, Professor, so I've did my instrumentations before. So to further add to that, what we can do for his question is that there's something called PID controller, if someone knows about that. So we just put a PID controller over there, so it just gives a bleep when a certain limit has been set, if the threshold has been reached. So only then your code can then, it's like an event generating code. So that would reduce your I/O bandwidth in that case. So that means everything depends largely on the sensor.
Yeah, it's all about the sensor.
If the sensor goes down, the data will be gone. Right?
Yeah. So the idea, if I put this in production, is to create a PCB to be able to hold all of this, and then maybe even have backups. Like it has 2 sensors in case one goes out, it knows to just start.
if you were building this commercially, so you start your startup,
Yeah.
you got a little plug-in, buy a few of these extra, and just plug in,
Yeah.
why not?
And yeah, once you put it on a board, the goal would be to make it something that's like as small as this. That you can just put up in corners of the house.
Anyway, that's how hardware works. Like if it fails, it has to fail this. We have no other option.
Yeah.
Are there any any way to visually see error handling of the? Sometimes you just don't know the sensor, went down.
Yeah, sometimes you're just not going to know. There can be, you can put some code in to make it, if it's not like responding, to restart, restart the voltage, to check the voltage that's going into it, if the wires are like connected. So things like that you can test for, you can, but besides that, if it's just dead,
it's more like typically hardware testing. We can't really test from software as far as I know for the hardware. That's why there's something called calibration testing over there. So there's a recommended testing for every sensor by the company saying that you need to test it for maybe once in a week or once in a month or something. They'll give some standard procedures how you're supposed to test that thing. So it's probably inside the sensor. So that's actually handled inside the sensor itself. You need to manually test it whether it's working properly or not.
I guess you can have a voting system boils into the stability of the product. You have at least 3 sensors.
Yeah.
Voting.
Yeah, and hopefully this is going to be cheap enough that people, like if it does go down, they're going to be able to get another one. Or have good help services that you call and you're like, it went down, and then they just send you.
For your startup company, you probably have to get this certified, I would guess, and that probably would add quite a bit to the cost.
Yeah, probably. I haven't done research that far out, but.
Yeah. I've never been part of that kind of process, but I've been close enough to it to see that it can be very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, doing anything that is within health or with humans. When I did my prosthetic arm last year with my group, and we were testing it on people, there was a whole thing this year about it being a problem because we were using human subjects, even though we got it taken, like, it ended up not being a problem because we weren't using human subjects because of, like, the technicality of it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that you feel.
As long as there wasn't remedial medical action or something, you're probably okay, I would assume.
And that's why I decided against like adding an air filtration system to it. Like I didn't want it, I wanted this to be informative and not something that fixed the problems, just because that's a lot more liability. Because like what if somebody is allergic to something and you just need that filtration system to turn on and it doesn't turn on, then like that's a huge problem.
Terrific, thank you, nice job. So I think this is Christina's presentation was a good model, you know. She had a nice elevator pitch and she was clear and she engaged us, so good model to use. My goal, while Yadung is setting up, my goal is to give you copies of my grade sheets. I was unhappy with my earlier grade sheets. That's why I haven't handed them out to any of the presenters yet. So I'm going to go back and regrade the.
That's unfair.
This,
That would be unfair.
No, it wouldn't change. You know, it wouldn't. It would just be more expressive to you. That's all. It wouldn't change your score.
Professor, could you give me?
Oh, yeah. So you're pulling my chain. Is that what you're doing? Lots of people pull my chain. Okay, so yeah, all you need here, that's CSE, so it's just class 1, just enter class 1. It tells you right here. And we're still, you didn't change this, did you? Okay, now, yeah, you're on PC. Good. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yadong. I'm going to talk about my project. It's the Bitcoin arbitrage. The arbitrage means you buy the Bitcoin at no price and then you sell it at a higher price. So you make profit from the exchange market. So first, let's look at what the project is about. The Bitcoin arbitrage is a web tool that it can automate the deal of the cryptocurrency on the different exchanges. So you should notice that this only works on the different exchange platforms. All these are the Bitcoin platforms, and I believe there are already dozens or maybe hundreds of them on today's market. So yeah, the truth is there are already many exchange platforms on that, and for example, if one price of the Bitcoin on this exchange Coinbase is this number, and on the other exchange is this number, and the price difference is $14. So you can basically you buy from the lower one and you sell to on the other higher one, so you make the price difference. That's how it works. And in addition to this exchange platforms, we also need REST API that are offered by those platforms. And fortunately, most of today's online exchange platforms, they do offer those REST API to developers. So my project is utilize this REST API to collect those price data and seeking the arbitrage opportunity from the. Okay, so here is I'm here to repeat the arbitrage principle. The principle is to take the advantage of the fact that the Bitcoin price are very depending on the different exchanges that trading on. And here is an example that last year December, this time the Bitcoin was trading. The Bitcoin price was different on the following exchange market. So here you can find they do show the different prices at that moment. So here the project goal is that first it has the capability to process the real-time concurrent incoming data stream at the server side. The incoming data stream, I mean the REST API that are offered by the market, and you utilize those REST API, and they will send the price data every second 1 to 60 times, very high frequency, and
isn't there an inherent problem with that, though? So it's changing so quickly, and there's small differences, and now you say, I want to act on that difference, and it takes you 20 minutes to get your order placed.
the problem.
That could happen. So that's why you need to first you need to collect those data as much as possible and as quick as possible. Then you seek the opportunity from it. Maybe there's a gap feature in the rules you set in the server, and you make a trade.
As far as I know, like the price changes at millisecond fraction. I know it personally. The prices change in milliseconds compared to different exchanges. Like so, and it's not like that. Like it's just going to increase as more opportunities decrease. It keeps fluctuates. Let's say you've shown that you're gonna sell it at $14 difference, but by the time you're gonna sell it, it might be like minus 14 over there. You'd be selling in loss, maybe. So
Yeah.
I'm not so sure whether we can really handle this thing.
Yeah. First of all, let me clear that this is just a pretending scenario. If you use it in practice, it will be much more complicated. You need to consider more factors. One of the most important considers that the trading process is very longer. So you need to consider the other factors too. But in my project, it's just like a simulation. It's not real.
It's perfectly okay to. So at the outset, you don't know whether this would really work because of the potential latency in placing an order.
Yeah.
But it gives you a chance to explore it, look at how quickly things are changing. It would be interesting if there was some way to measure the latency time from when you when you decide to place an order and it actually is placed. And I don't know whether you could do that without losing potentially a lot of money. But
I think I will definitely lose money. If things goes easy, then everybody make money by developing such tools. Yeah, I finished. And the second goal is that this software at least dealing with at least two type of currencies and at least use two exchange APIs. That's the baseline of the project. Of course, it can be escalated more types and more exchange markets. And then the project also required to display the data it collects to users, and also you need to display it to user very smoothly because it's a web browser system. The user don't want their browser page refresh frequently time to time. And so the requirement is no refreshing the whole page at the client side. For my personal, I will learn the currently popular web development technology. It includes the Go programming language and the main stack. So here is the text selection used for this project. It consists of the Go language. It is used for the concurrent thread server, and the Node Express and MongoDB. It used to build asynchronous non-block server, and for client side, use React to give the user async client, so that the user won't get suffered from the page refresh.
What is AC? ASYN?
Asynchronous.
You know, so what's the role of Go here as a concurrent thread server? And how do you? I mean, it's a server backend, right? What is the role that's going to play when compared to Node.js?
You mean the
difference between
difference?
these two servers? Yeah.
Different between the two
Functionality.
It's just my personal understanding that when you build your server by the Go language, the server is running on multi-threading model, so it can handle things concurrently. But when you build the server by Node, because Node is just a queue-based event.
So is your model that you're going to try both?
I'm going to use both.
Okay.
Both.
I think Go actually creates processes, new processes, not new threads. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm quite sure that it does.
You mean Go?
Yeah, but it's asynchronous for sure. It is concurrent, but I think it's process concurrency, not thread concurrency.
So here's the whole picture of the project, and the left part is the real-time task that is handled by the Go server, and the right side is the non-real-time task that are handled by the Node server. So the reason I separate the whole picture into two sections because the Go server offers the capability of the threading-based concurrency. So when my system face the time-intensified incoming data from the market's REST APIs, I wish to handle them simultaneously.
Are there Go bindings for Mongo?
No, there are two servers.
No, I know. I'm asking, are there Go? So you want Go to talk to Mongo? Right?
Yes.
So you need a binding from Go to Mongo, to the Mongo API, and those exist. Wouldn't surprise me that they do. I've never heard of anybody programming Mongo interactions with Go, so it may well have all the bindings you need. I just don't know for sure that it does.
For now, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but he wants to use Go. So anyway, probably want to check that pretty quickly because that might change your diagram a little bit. Just to make sure that you do have mine. It wouldn't surprise me a bit that there is.
So you never heard that Go that project like Go use it together with Mongo?
I've never heard of it, but I haven't been looking either. Okay, so it's not surprising. May well be lots of Go to Mongo applications. I just don't know. I would consult Dr. Google, after class. Yeah, just so you don't go
you know, several steps down that path and then discover that you can't do it because there is no lightning.
I think it's on Google. It's on Google.
Okay.
So for the right section, the non-real-time task means the server just fetch data from the MongoDB and present them to the browser. In this part, I use the node as a server because the node is a perfect model for non-real-time scenario. So here is how here is the reasons that the different tags used. For the Go programming language, the arbitrage process is a very time-intensive task because it need to simultaneously collect the REST API's data from the different source, and this price data could change every second. And here's a diagram to illustrate how the flow going through. Here are two exchange provider, and through their REST API, the Go routine can collect the incoming source data very quickly and concurrently. And here is a Bitcoin to dollars, and after the moment that the two routines collect the data from different sources, and they do the computation of the price difference, and do the decision making that whether to bid the trade. So here is the tag use the I Node and the React because it's a non-time intensive task. So I use the JavaScript based tag stacks, and the node is just a server that feeds data to the React UI component, and then the React component will display the chart to users. Here is not really visualization part in the project. It's just
you know what would be really interesting? If you collect this data, make your comparisons, and then for various latencies, see what your average performance is. So if the latency is 0, you're almost guaranteed to making money. If the longer the latency gets, the less likely it is you're going to make money, and more likely you are going to lose money. Okay, so it would be really interesting to do that. But, so you're not really placing an order, but you're placing a hypothetical order, and then you're comparing that to the data. Whatever the latency time is that you're assuming, you compare that to the data later, and you keep running it, and you keep a running average, and you see how well you did. So you might discover that my latency has to be less than 45 seconds, or I have virtually no chance of making. My chance of making money is vanishingly small. So you could do that without ever placing an order and get really interesting information.
For now, the REST API, I'm interested in just.
You don't have to. No, that wouldn't change any of that. Wouldn't change anything. You could use exactly the setup you're talking about.
Oh, I know.
Okay, but now what you do, you're comparing those differences, and now, you know, you compare that difference. You know, you made a buy decision, and then you compare that what happened. You know that. You know, whatever the latency time you assume, you still got that data coming in, so it's easy to make that comparison. Okay.
Oh, okay. But if I use buy like the buying or selling REST API.
I'm not asking you to buy anything. All I'm saying is take a hypothetical latency. You know, assuming it takes me a minute and a half to place an order. Am I gonna make money? Assuming I can place an order in 30 seconds, am I gonna make money? Assuming I can place an order in 15 seconds, am I gonna make money? That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think you would get really, it would separate out the winners from the losers really quickly, and most of us would be losers, I think. Anyway, I just suggested that because it won't really change anything you've done.
Mm-hmm. Here is a project's activity. Here for the Go server, there's a ticker that every time the ticker will trigger the Go routine to read the exchanges API and to get the data, and then put the data to the simulator. The simulator is just pretending to buy or not. And after that, it will put the profit or the raw data into the MongoDB, and then from here it is a node server that it will start. In my project, it's also driven by the ticker. So every time the ticker starts, it will try to fetch the data once and push it to the client side.
I'm not sure I understand why you need the trigger for your data, because you're triggering the retrieval, and then the retrieval just gets pushed immediately to a node.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure you need to tell Node that I got data coming, because Node will get data and just react to it when it.
Yeah.
That's just something I'm not thinking about. Anyway.
Do you have any comment on this? Because it's not mature, I believe.
So, you know, I mean, so when you get data, you're going to store it in Mongo, but you could at the same time send it on to Node for display. Now you don't have to trigger. You don't have to trigger Node. You know, just the fact that Node received the data, send it is the trigger. That's all.
So the node is just a while loop to track the.
Yeah, kind of.
You're just sending a, node that has a queue. You're just putting stuff in node's queue.
So here is some tech concept I want to talk about here. First is React. React is a UI, is a JavaScript UI library that was born in the Facebook ads group, and with this library, your code only works on the React's in-memory virtual DOM. So that means you tell the React what state you want to set to the UI, and the rest of things that and then the rest the React will take care for you. The React will compare the we'll make sure that the DOM match the real state. And so here is the illustration how the React works. The virtual DOM is located in the memory place, and the real DOM is in the browser environment. So React will do everything behind the hood. So with this mechanism, you can the client can update data without refreshing the whole page. And for Node Express and Mongo, I want to skip because we have talked about in the previous project. And for the main stack, I select here because the JavaScript everywhere and JSON everywhere. So it could be a little easier. Rather. So here's the other tag that I want to introduce. I use main stack because it has a very good NPM ecosystem. Inside this system, you can utilize many tools to help the process of development. Like the Babel compiler, basically the compiler can transform your JavaScript code to the older code to compatible to other version of the environment. And it also can compare the React's JSX code to JavaScript code. JSX is a format that provided by React. And here's an automation tool for development. The Babel automation tool can watch the source code. If any change happened in your source code, it can restart the server to reload the new script. And the Webpack is a bundle tool that it can bundle all your different JavaScript files into one, and it's a good help for the code management. And the lint and the lint package.
I don't know whether it would be here because it's a big help when you're going from site to site to site. So somebody coming to a site from another site will download the JavaScript, and that makes it a lot quicker to download when it's bundled in that Webpack. But if you stay on that same site, which you're going to do, then that JavaScript is cached in the browser and you'll never download it again. So my guess is that Webpack really won't help you that much.
Oh yes, well, that's the thing. It's called hot replacement. Something like that.
What it speeds up is the first time you go to the site, that's when you download JavaScript. If you don't change the site or you don't do something that causes that JavaScript to change, the browser doesn't reload it.
Yeah, but if you use a Webpack, it provides the capability of how the replacement of the JavaScript. So every time the new JavaScript generated, it will automatically push to the client side. That's why the Webpack is used very popular.
Yeah, but you're not doing that. You're not doing your scenario isn't a place where that would help, I think. Because you're just going to look at that one site. You're just looking at that one. I'm not talking about the REST APIs. I'm talking about the site that the views that you're presenting to the browser. The browser is always going to be sitting and looking at that one view. So there's not going to be changing. The first time it looks, it'll cache the JavaScript, and JavaScript won't be coming back and forth anymore. JSON will, but JavaScript won't. I don't want to belabor it, but
I think it's like a standard practice.
yeah, because you're going from site to site, so that means the first time somebody comes to your site, they get a quick download. That's why it's popular. But that's not what he's doing.
And the idea is that constantly updating your site.
If I'm staying on the same site, I'm not reloading JavaScript, period.
I know. I'm saying the idea is that you're updating the JavaScript code.
Oh, obfuscating?
Updating. You're updating the code maybe once a
Yeah, but once you're on the site, you're not going to update it. It's cached in the browser, and there's no reason to update it. What are we doing here that would update that JavaScript?
On the server side, you update the code, you add features and so on.
That's so that happens once every month. I don't think that's why it's used. I think the reason it's used is to make that first time you go to a site, it loads quickly. Bang. That's why it's important. So I want people to come back to my site. If I make them wait for 45 seconds for that first download, they're not going to come back. But if I make it 15 seconds, they'll come back. My mental model, I could be wrong, but anyway.
And the link and plus the VS Code will give you the good job standing code standard. Here is the example that I tried. You use Airbnb JavaScript standard. It provides a complete, most recent ES 2015 JavaScript standard, and plus other rules. So without lint, while programming JavaScript is really painful because many hours, but the editor gave me nothing feedback. Yeah. But with this, it's much more easier.
When you do the probes, demo that for us a little bit. When you do the probing presentation, just demo that, because I'd be interested in. Because I've spent many hours tinkering with JavaScript too.
Here's my schedule. Here's my.
Could you go back to that slide? I haven't finished digesting what's on there. So.
my schedule is that's 3 phases in the schedule. First, I need to conquer the language basic knowledge, and they include Go language, the YES 2015 standard JavaScript, and the MERN structure, how to deploy it and use it, and the React UI component, how to do the development based on the React rules, and then I will do the integration. I will combine the REST API with the Go server, and at this phase, at least I will integrate two platforms, REST API, and I will arbitrage two types of cryptocurrencies. Then at last I will integrate the Go with the node server, and let the two servers work together.
Worried about that last step. I mean, I'm worried about the timing for that last step, you know. So it looks to me like you're got an effort spike that's maybe enormous. So
I'm worried too.
Yeah, what would be a good idea if you would think a little bit about how can I provide some value if I don't get all the way there? And I think you can. But, you know, you'd like to, just the fact that you are reading from the exchanges, you know, if you just displayed the activity, you know, I don't know, but, you know, the one thing you don't want to happen is that when it's time for you to do your final presentation, you say, well, I'm almost there, but I didn't get there. I don't have anything to show you. Okay. You want to try to have things to show as you go. You know, the probing presentations try to help you do that. So you're already, you know, you're showing the stuff fairly early. No. The schedule's fine. It's just that I'm worried about you not being able to keep doing it.
Let's see at that time.
When's the probing presentation going to be?
Presentations are just after classes end.
The probing presentation.
Oh, the probing presentation is on the schedule. I've forgotten the date, but if you go and look at the syllabus, it's laid out there. Pretty much, you know, we're going to finish up the tech presentation just after spring break, and I had allowed some time to go back and revisit some of COM, but I'm not sure we're going to make it. I think we might start doing probing presentations as soon as we finish the tech presentation. So, do me a favor and send me an email asking that question. I'll think about it a little bit between now. If you send it tonight, I'll see it tomorrow morning, and I'll think about it a little bit before we try to have a better answer for that good question. Okay, on Thursday.
Here the ambition goes. The first one is to host a Go server on the Google Cloud to gain better performance for the scalable application scenario. Because the goal is a multi-threading model, so if you only use it on a local PC, because the local PC almost only four cores, for CPU cores, so it cannot fully provide the multi-threading power. So if you use it on the cluster, it will assign each thread, each go routine on a single car, on a single CPU car. Then it can the real time can be guaranteed. Imagine that you subscribe hundreds of REST API from exchanges, and you definitely need such deployment. And the second ambitious goal is to explore other concurrent programming languages like this. I'm not sure whether I can go that further.
I'm sure you can.
Okay.
So, go back to your last slide. I think the last integrate Go with Node by May 2nd is an ambitious goal. Okay. So, I think, why don't you and I chat about it sometime? I can't do it after class today, but maybe after class on Thursday. Just a quick conversation for 5 minutes or so. If you bring your laptop with these slides on it, we could have a little chat.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, one suggestion for everybody, that your last slide says end. So we know you're done. Okay. Thank you. We didn't clap after Christina, but she got so many questions, you knew it was a good presentation, so she should.
We did clap again. We did clap.
Did we clap?
Yeah.
Oh, we did. I didn't remember clapping. I guess I didn't clap. Shame on me. Well, I should have.
I have a question about Project 1. Is the due date still Tuesday after break?
No, I'm going to delay it. I meant to mention I am doing a little prototype for Project 1. The issue with Project 1 is I wrote the requirements to force you to have one component talk to another one. And so how do you hook that up? And I'm doing a little demo, which I hope I can post sometime tomorrow. That it doesn't do any of the processing you need to do. It just has a client and a helper server, a helper component, and a main component, and I hook them up. And so you can, so that just, so basically you have to pass an interface pointer through an interface to guarantee that you follow comms rules. So my game plan is to post that with enough comments in the code so it doesn't really need a whole lot of conversation. So, okay.
Oh, these are some JavaScript tutorials in your code repository. Do you suggest them? I've seen located some.
That was fairly basic stuff. I was showing you how the JavaScript execution engine runs, and sure, I think it's a great idea. What that does is give you the mental model of how JavaScript works. It's a prototype-based system. The engine is really, virtually, Node engine is really the JavaScript execution engine. I had meant to, again, talk about that a little bit, but we ran out of time. more people in the class than it was last year. All righty, so next time, let's see who presents next time. On Thursday, we'll hear from Hayu and Arash and
Yes.
Ruchi Kao.
Yeah, I got invited to a group.